Amid the ongoing turmoil in WWE, there is a new interim head of talent relations replacing John Laurinaitis, who is currently being investigated. Speaking of people being investigated, Vince McMahon once again appeared on WWE programming last night as he appeared on Monday Night Raw. We had the return of Elias, plus a top star is off Money in the Bank after not being medically cleared. All this and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into today, and at the moment there is so much going on in the world of WWE, isn't there? With Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, these allegations, these investigations, Vince McMahon stepping down, appearing on SmackDown, appearing on Raw, but a lot of people have been asking about John Laurinaitis. What is the future of John Laurinaitis? Now, previously I had said that I think he was going to be gone effectively very, very soon, and that might be the case, at least in the interim, because Bruce Prichard, yes, Bruce Prichard is replacing John Laurinaitis as the head of talent relations on an interim basis. Now, WWE issued a memo to talent Monday following Raw, announcing that Senior Vice President Bruce Prichard will be taking over as the interim head of talent relations effective immediately. This comes from a report from PW Insider. Now, the memo also informed talents that John Laurinaitis has been placed on, quote, administrative leave, end quote, in light of the serious allegations made against him and Vince McMahon. The memo added that Laurinaitis will not be on the road with WWE, quote, pending the conclusion of our board of directors internal investigation, end quote. Now, as noted previously, Laurinaitis hasn't been on the road since WWE's board of directors investigation was publicly revealed last week. And of course, this comes after the explosive Wall Street Journal. That story dropped last week. It was alleged that McMahon had a consensual relationship with a WWE paralegal and later agreed to a $3 million settlement in January of this year to bar that person from commenting on the affair. Now, while the investigation, which actually began on March 30, initially focused on McMahon's settlement with the 41-year-old woman, it's since been expanded into several NDA agreements involving misconduct claims by other female or former female employees from WWE about both Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis. Now, Fightful Select's follow-up report to the story noted that when Laurinaitis was rehired as WWE's head of talent relations in last year, in 2021, one specific female talent was frustrated with the move. The talent revealed she would rather get all of her stuff sent to her in a trash bag when she gets fired, rather than deal with Laurinaitis. The report quoted other employees as saying they believe the allegations against McMahon and Laurinaitis will lead to a, quote, domino effect and the possible exit of Laurinaitis from the company. Now, a later report from Fightful suggested that Laurinaitis is expected to exit the company amidst these allegations of misconduct against him, with one source noting that as long as McMahon has any say, Laurinaitis' position is safe unless he is going to be determined as, quote, Vince's latest scapegoat. Now, obviously, McMahon himself, we will talk about Vince in a second, stepped down as the CEO and chairman to cooperate with this ongoing investigation from the WWE's board of directors. Now, when it comes to Bruce Prichard, it must be said that the reaction to Bruce stepping in, replacing Laurinaitis, isn't exactly positive either. Now, in an update from Fightful Select, as I mentioned, this was their original reporting, but they have since followed up on this initial report. I mentioned PW Insider broke the story as well. The unanimous belief among those in the company is that Laurinaitis, quote, was as good as gone, with several talents going as far to say that actually, quote, they're celebrating his impending departure. However, as I mentioned, it's not all good news for those talents, because the news of Bruce Prichard stepping into Laurinaitis' role didn't exactly elicit a positive reaction backstage. Now, the main issue here, per the talents backstage that Fightful have spoken to, is that Prichard will now be moonlighting as both the head of creative and the head of talent relations. That is a lot of responsibility and possibly too much considering the size of the company and the size of the job in hand. Now, several former and current talents alike chimed in, with one saying, quote, Vince only knows 3 people, as a joke to Laurinaitis and Prichard being tasked with those roles. Another said they'd received multiple texts from talent specifying a particular concern they had about Prichard handling both roles. Quote, now if you want time off, you have to ask the person who is effectively your filter between creative and Vince McMahon, the anonymous talent was quoted as saying. So there's a lot to get into, obviously, with that story. There's always a lot to get into when it comes to WWE at the moment because there's always so much happening, especially with this story, which, as I've mentioned before, is probably one of, if not the biggest news story in modern-day WWE history. Now, the news of Laurinaitis stepping down or being brushed aside or being placed on administrative leave, whatever WWE wants to call it, that happening is not a surprise. I expected that to happen fairly quickly. It just goes to show, isn't it? You know, Vince McMahon was initially the subject of these investigations. He's still being investigated. John Laurinaitis got pulled into this because of the allegations of misconduct against him. One's on administrative leave and probably isn't going to be coming back to the company. The other's appearing on television every single week. The other opened SmackDown and was on Raw as well last night. And it goes to show that Vince McMahon is his company. I mean, that doesn't mean he can't get fired, but Vince McMahon is not going down without a fight. Vince McMahon is politicking his behind off, shall we say, right now, because he's doing his very best to prove to everyone he's not going down without a fight. He is trying to sway the narrative. Vince McMahon is doing his best to win in the court of public opinion, it would appear right now, because he's appearing on SmackDown and Raw to get ratings, but also, I think, as a big political power move to say, look, I'm in control. I still control what you see on programming every single week. I still manage all of these people. I still handle the creative. And when I step out into arena, I still get cheered by thousands of people every single week. And people still sing my song. They still sing No Chance in Hell. And look how great I am. I'm Vince McMahon. And that's what he thinks. This is what's wild about all of this kind of stuff. And we always say this about Vince McMahon as well, don't we? That this is a guy that can put on bad television, or he can put on bad angles, or people can be so unhappy with the creative or the length of the shows, or have a laundry list of complaints about WWE programming. But once the guy steps through the curtain and his music plays, everyone cheers, everyone claps, everyone starts bowing down, and they're doing the same now. This is a guy that's got allegations, serious allegations of misconduct against him. He's being investigated by his own company. He had to step down as the chairman and CEO of his own company. Now, eventually, he'll probably come back to that role, but the point is he's being investigated for serious allegations, and people are cheering him, people are clapping because they like the theme song, because we don't see Vince McMahon or Mr. McMahon every single week. It's bizarre. We're living in a bizarre world right now. Now, as far as Bruce Prichard replacing John Laurinaitis, it's the same. It is the same. It's like it's replacing a dog with a different species. It's like replacing a Labrador with a Springer Spaniel. It's still a dog at the end of the day. It's still the same person. And the fact that, I know it's on an interim basis, but the fact that you've got now the guy who's running creative. I know Vince McMahon runs creative, but still, he's the executive director of WWE, Bruce Prichard. He has a big say in terms of what happens on the television show every single week. He's handling now talent relations. Well, look, let's draw the line. Vince McMahon's in charge of creative, and the guy that's also in charge of creative is now managing talent relations. So it's Vince McMahon. It's still Vince McMahon controlling creative and still controlling talent relations. Nothing has changed in that part. And this is why it goes to show why a lot of people, when these news stories came out of Vince McMahon stepped down as the chairman and the CEO on an interim basis, it doesn't mean anything. It's optics. That's all it is. It's optics. And ultimately, what this investigation will find, unless they can find something really more serious that will stick to Vince McMahon, he will still be in power. He will still eventually be the chairman and CEO again. He's beaten the federal government. He'll beat his own company. That's what he does. So I'm not surprised by this news. I don't think we're going to see any drastic change. And I'm not surprised by people within the company aren't celebrating Bruce Prichard being put into this role. What difference is it going to make? None. Now, speaking of Vince McMahon, as I mentioned, Vince McMahon made a surprise appearance last night on Monday Night Raw. He isn't letting this increased attention of recent allegations bring him down. At least doesn't appear so, because he was in a very cheerful mood, of course, for SmackDown on Friday. And he was also in a very cheery mood on Raw last night as well. Mr. McMahon made another appearance on WWE television in less than a week. We noted how this past Friday, obviously on SmackDown, he reminded the audience watching of the intro that plays before every show. He said, then, now, forever, and most importantly, together. He then wrapped the brief segment by saying, welcome to SmackDown, tossed the mic aside and exited the ring. Now, last night was just as brief by Vince McMahon. He welcomed fans to the show and mentioned how it's the 1,517th edition of Monday Night Raw, which makes it the longest running episodic television to date. He says that throughout the 30 years WWE's been on the air, one man was top for 2/3 of that time, and his name is John Cena. He praised John Cena's work and promoted that next week on Raw, John Cena will be making his return. Vince smiled, laughed, exited the ring with a pep in his step. He even jumped to the floor. But he was notably wobbly as he exited the ropes because, again, this is a guy who is 76 years old. But again, I looked at it as we're watching a TV show, a scripted TV show, where the guy in charge of the creative on that scripted TV show is trying to play this four-dimensional chess by proving to people within the company that don't investigate me too much because I can still go on TV every single week and say what I want. For me, I don't know. Obviously, these appearances are a ratings grab. Of course they are. Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon, his name was trending all over social media Friday. So him appearing on SmackDown and not saying anything. If anything, I think it was laughable how people were surprised that he didn't say anything. I can't believe he didn't say anything. Well, what's he going to say? He's not going to drop it. He's not going to put his foot in it. Clearly, it was a ratings grab. But also now, it does feel like this sort of, gesturing kind of situation, doesn't it? Of, I'm still in charge. Everyone know here I'm still in charge. And this is meant to be our light entertainment program. And you've got a guy in his 70s going out there, waffling on, not really saying anything. But by not saying anything, he's actually saying quite a lot because he's not talking to us. He's talking to those in WWE. He's talking to the board of directors. Investigate me as much as you want. I'm still on TV and I'll keep going on TV. And that's what it feels like. It's bizarre. It's just a bizarre situation. And Vince acting all happy backstage at SmackDown, jumping off the steps, trying to appear like I'm in the best mood of my life. I'm not getting investigated. I'm not investigated, right? I'm in the best mood of my life. What are you talking about, investigation? No investigation, because he's not going to sell it. He wasn't selling it when he was getting investigated by the federal government, and he was going to be going to jail. He's not going to be selling anything at all, and that's what he's doing right now. To me, that's what it seems painfully obvious he's doing his best not to sell it. But the problem is when you try your best not to sell something, you kind of are selling it at the same time, right? And that's kind of what it appears to me. I do want to talk about a couple of other things coming out of Raw last night. One was the return of Elias. Now, for the first time in, like a year, we saw Elias, or the Elias character, on WWE television. Last night's Raw featured a concert segment, which showed a live musical performance from Ezekiel's older brother, that being Elias. But before Elias made his way into the arena to perform for the WWE Universe, he and Zeke had a backstage segment where they conversed about their current lives as Elias tuned his guitar. Elias explained that the reason he's been absent is because he's been on the road, traveling. He's been playing music, but nothing compares to the WWE crowd. Now, again, just ignoring the vignettes where he's smashing tombstones, and he said Elias is dead. Maybe, well, he meant as a wrestler, I guess. I don't know. But he said he's happy for his younger brother, living out his dreams, and encourages him to chase after the Money in the Bank briefcase. Now, he welcomed the fans to the audience. He was eventually cut off, as Elias always is, by Kevin Owens. Owens said the video didn't prove anything because anybody could use special effects. Ezekiel then appeared on the Titantron screen and emphasized that he and Elias are by no means the same person. Elias then got the audience to sing along about a song saying Kevin Owens is a liar, which frustrated Kevin enough to toss the guitar out of the ring and break it. Elias wasn't happy about that. He delivered a jumping knee to Owens, followed by a guitar shot to the back of the head with the guitar. The segment in the ring then wrapped up as Kevin stumbled to the back. He was greeted by an interviewer asking if he now believes that Ezekiel and Elias are different people now. Owens said he is still not convinced, explaining that Zeke could have pre-recorded that segment and glued on a fake beard to act like Elias, which, of course, the irony is that is true. They obviously are the same people. But you know what? I do, obviously, look, people criticize WWE and a lot of the time, rightfully so. But since this whole angle started, which again was the Raw after WrestleMania, the fact that we're in late June at this point and this angle's still going on, but it's fresh. It has no business being this good. No business being this good. It's a stupid idea on paper, but it works. And I think that, first of all, Kevin Owens deserves a huge amount of credit for getting this thing over. Talk about like going from one thing to another. He main evented the first night of WrestleMania with Stone Cold Steve Austin. This guy's first match in nearly 20 years. And and he goes from that to an angle where he's with Ezekiel, who's Elias, and Elias has just shaved his beard and all this kind of stuff, and he's trying to prove that he's the same person. It's a dumb idea, but it works. It's compelling because it's different. And I think that's the point with WWE nowadays, isn't it? We appreciate different. The whole, they're the same person, they're brothers, it has been done before. But this has been done really well, and people, you were curious going into Raw last, how are they going to do it? And it's fairly easy in terms of, you know, the special effects to do it and the green screen and, you know, getting the shot, lining it up pretty much the same, and that's how you do it. But it was done well. Of course, the beard points on Elias didn't look great, but I think it passed. It passed the test, and it's fun. It's good watching. It doesn't have any business being this good, but fair play to everyone involved, because again, it has no business being that good, but it really is good. Finally, a bit of interesting news actually is that it was going to be Bianca Belair versus Rhea Ripley, of course, for Money in the Bank for the Raw Women's Championship, but it actually kicked off Raw last night with a shocking announcement from Bianca Belair. She announced that Rhea Ripley, quote, will not be medically cleared to compete at Money in the Bank on July 2nd. Due to her absence, a new #1 contender was crowned last night, that being Carmella. Carmella won the match between Alexa Bliss, herself, Liv Morgan, Asuka, and Becky Lynch to become the #1 contender for the Raw Women's Championship. Now, at this time, I don't believe we really have any more details as to why Rhea Ripley hasn't been medically cleared. We don't know if it's an injury, we don't know if it's COVID, we don't know what the situation is, but certainly shocking, disappointing. I was really excited to see Bianca Belair versus Rhea Ripley. I think that, you know, they've had a ton of history of each other dating back to NXT, you know, Royal Rumble a couple of years ago where they were the final two competitors, WrestleMania last year winning the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship on the same night. They've kind of had these parallels, and that was going to be a really fun, exciting match. I always felt that Bianca Belair would retain. Now I definitely feel she's going to retain. And it's not to say Carmella won't have a good match, but there's just not as much interest there for me. So I guess the hope probably would be that they have this match and then they pivot back to Rhea Ripley at the next event. But of course, the next event is SummerSlam. And the rumor is that it's going to be Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch again, which again, I have no interest in seeing again because we've seen it. We need to move on to different stuff. So once we have more information as to what the situation is with Rhea Ripley, of course, we'll talk about it here on the channel. But anyway, guys, be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.